have a confession to make. I don't want to travel like I used to. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately because there was a time I did want to travel like that. Going miles down a forest road to try to find camping, never knowing what was around the next turn, excited about what might be around the next turn, whether it be the perfect camp or an obstacle, used to excite me. That was what I started this life for. All that uncertainty, all the excitement and adventure, and just discovering what was on the road ahead of me. And you know, none of that was a mistake. Definitely not a mistake. It was exactly what I wanted to do. I just don't think it's what I want to do anymore. You know, and that got me thinking, why is it so hard for us to give ourselves permission to give up a life we chose? Why do we think that once we choose a version of our lives that we're supposed to stay in it? I'm thinking marriage. I'm thinking about jobs. I'm thinking about lifestyle as far as sticks and bricks or boating life or biking life or whatever you might be doing, RV life. Why does, and this especially makes me think of marriage, why does deciding to do something different seem to invalidate that original choice? And that's what I want to talk about today.
There ain't nobody gonna do it for you. You got to find your own.
I think a lot of us were taught that there is a right life to find. And I think for a lot of us who spend our lives chasing the American dream, that right life had a very specific look, right? The house, the picket fence, the proverbial picket fence, maybe the real picket fence, the spouse, the career. For some of us, the education, 2.3 kids, right? The second car and the vacations in Maui, right? I think for a lot of us who chase the American dream, we had the idea that there is a right life to find, a right life to find. And there is this idea that eventually we will land on that life and say, okay, this is where I'm at and this is who I am. But I know for a lot of us, myself included, I got there and I was like, yeah, this isn't it. And that's what led me to RV life. I was like, yeah, no, this isn't real. I spent my whole life chasing the career and the house and the husband, only to get it to realize it was not at all what I wanted. I felt trapped. I felt so empty. And many of you who know my story, I was literally drinking myself to death. But there's this idea that once we get there, once we get that version of the right life, that you'll be like, yeah, okay, I've figured it out. I've won life, right? I have won life. But what if there isn't one final version of your life? What if there are many? What if the version of your life is whatever phase of your growth, your development, your health, your years puts you in? What if that is really what life is about? Finding out what is right for you now and chasing that. What if we're supposed to keep changing? And why should the woman you were when you were 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50 get to decide what the woman at 59 or 60 or 70 has to want? Why should your younger self be telling you today, in your reality, whatever it is now, that you should be living your life a certain way? If you think about that, it doesn't make any sense, right? Shouldn't you, now who you are in this moment, get to decide what your life should look like? Why are we giving all that power to our younger self, who I think most of us would admit wasn't really as smart as she thought she was, right? And here's a really important message that I want to share with you today. Changing your mind does not mean that you made a mistake. Changing my mind about what 59-year-old Carolyn wants versus what 48-year-old Carolyn wants doesn't mean the last 10 years of my life were a mistake. They absolutely were not. They were exactly what I needed. And same with you. Whatever you decided to do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago. Whatever you want to do today does not invalidate all those years. It doesn't make them a mistake. This is one thing that I struggled with a lot through therapy and all the mistakes and detours and side roads that I've taken figuratively in my life and all the dark places that I went. And I think especially my marriage, I felt when I got out that I had wasted 13 years of my life in a marriage. And I still struggle with that. Like, I wasted my time. It was a mistake, but it really is true that all those experiences got me where I needed to be because, and this is especially with my marriage, I realized I had to at some point get married in order for me to realize it wasn't what I wanted. I had to get a house. And this is just my process. I don't know, maybe if I had spent another 10 years in therapy, I would have gotten there without getting the marriage and the house. But that was part of my process of becoming me, of developing my own sense of self, in chasing and getting the things that I thought I wanted. And I think even with therapy, it's kind of like that little kid, you tell them not to touch the stove and they're going to touch the stove anyway because they got to experience it for themselves. I think there are things in life that we have to, even as adults, experience for ourselves. I always say I live my life according to a process of elimination. I try all the things I don't want to get to what I do want. And I think there might be, can anybody else relate to that? I don't know that anybody, even in therapy, even myself, I don't think I would have been able to convince myself, even through all the therapy, that I didn't want to get married. I think it was so ingrained in me that I needed a man in my life to complete me. I don't know if I would have ever gotten there on my own. I had to get married because I do think also, I almost hate to admit this, but who I was back then, I think getting married validated me as a person and as a woman. And I think once I did that and left the marriage, I think that empowered me to say, see, I was married. I can get married, which is weird because I had turned down marriage proposals at other times in my life. But I think just the fact that I got married, stayed in the marriage, worked on the marriage, and then inevitably walked away from the marriage helped me realize that's not what I wanted. What you did for the past, X amount of years, if it's different from what you want to do today, that does not mean it was a mistake. It was what you needed to do at the time. 40-year-old me, 30-year-old me when I got married needed to get married then. It was something in my life that had to be done. 48-year-old me needed to get rid of everything and move into an RV and travel as adventurously and as, oh boy, the things that I did my first few years on the road, that's what 48-year-old me needed. 48-year-old me did not need what 59-year-old me needs, and 59-year-old me does not need what 48-year-old me needed. My needs are different. I've experienced more. I think that's what it boils down to. I've experienced more. I've learned more about the world. I've learned more about myself. I've also given myself more permission to just say, you know what? I don't need to drive down that road if it means getting stuck. I don't need to prove anything. But when it does come time for us to change our minds, why is it so hard? Why do we keep hearing, and maybe we are even telling ourselves, but you wanted that. That's what you always wanted. You worked so hard for that promotion. You worked so hard for that job. You worked so hard for that house. What do you mean you don't want it now? That was your dream. How can you say you don't want that anymore? And here's the thing. I've talked to women about this in my one-on-one consultations, and I've done social media posts about it. Other people become invested in your dream. Other people become invested in your decisions, in your process. So when you decide you want to pivot, other people, outside forces, family, friends, are as invested, and it might be hard for them, especially people who don't change, who don't pivot, who do stay in one place for a long time. It might be really hard for them to understand why you need to pivot, why, yeah, you know what, I've chased this dream for 20 years and I'm a different person, and you know what, it's not what that old version of me wanted. I want something else. It might be really hard for some people to understand. And you know what? I'm not saying you have to hate your life to want to change it. I don't hate my life. But we seem to only give ourselves permission to change something when it becomes truly awful. That job, that relationship, that living situation. We only seem to give ourselves permission to change when something becomes too unbearable to keep doing. But what if we don't have to wait for it to get to that point? What if we can just decide, I don't want to live this way anymore like I did? I think that was part of the reason people had such a hard time with my channel when I first started. I was 48. I had a career and a business in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was a marketing consultant. I was making decent money, but living paycheck to paycheck because of the cost of living. And by any outsider, my life looked very successful, but it wasn't what I wanted. And a lot of people dug into my background, threatened to hire private investigators, tried to contact old clients because they just couldn't believe that I would voluntarily live a life that wasn't awful. Why would anybody live a life that it looks great from the outside to live in a junky RV on public lands? Why would anybody do that? And literally, I saw people trying to crowdfund private investigators to look into my background. My ex-husband, R.I.P., rest in peace, my ex-husband, they contacted him to try to get dirt on me because they could not believe, why would anybody leave a life that's not truly horrible? That's what is ingrained in us. And dare I say, I think, especially for a lot of women, stay in relationships until they're really awful. Get by, do your best, try harder, do more, and only leave when it's truly awful. But what if we don't have to wait? What if we can change just because we want to? Ah, what a concept. Da-da-da. Cue the sound effects. Da-da-da. You know, you don't have to wait until your boss turns completely toxic on you or the town just gets unbearable to decide for yourself, this just isn't what I want to do anymore. Because I don't want to do this anymore is just information. It's data. It's knowledge about yourself and your desires and your wants and your wishes. It's not an indictment of everything that came before it. It's just new information. And part of the reason I think many of us stay in situations that no longer fulfill us or make us happy, maybe they're not awful, horrible, toxic, but maybe they're just not completely filling us up the way we thought they would or even the way they used to. And part of that is the sunk cost trap, right? I've put 20 years into this marriage. I can't just walk away now. I have put 30 years into this job. Of course, there are definitely logistical reasons why you wouldn't walk away from a job when you're nearing retirement. Of course, there are very rational reasons for that. And I'm not talking about that in this video, but I'm talking about the reasons why emotionally, psychologically, you are feeling like you should stay because you have invested so much time and energy, maybe even money, into the dream that you were chasing 20, 30, 40 years ago. That sunk cost trap can keep us trapped in what 20-year-old us or 30-year-old us wanted. And what happens is we keep investing more time, more money, more energy, more years into that sunk cost because we've already invested in it. And what we're doing is like, okay, that's gone. We're never going to get back those 20 years that we invested in this dream. Why would you spend the next 20 years just because you already spent 20 years, right? That there's a whole thing in economics, the sunk cost, I don't know what it's called, the sunk cost something in economics. Okay, I already spent $100 on this and it's not really working. It's not really what I want. So should I sink another $100 into it to get it to what I want, or should I walk away? And that's a real economics decision. But when we apply that to real life and years and time and energy, the same is true. Why would you put another 20 years into something that the last 20 years got you to a place you don't want to be, right? Instead, invest that next 20 years into something you do want to do. Or it doesn't have to be the next 20 years, because you might get 1 year into your new thing and be like, yeah, no, this isn't it either. Don't be afraid to try on different versions of your life. That was the thing too. When I drove out of my backyard, when I bought the RV, I put my car, I had a Toyota Avalon, almost brand new. I put it in, but it was paid off. So I put it in storage and I said, you know what? I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back. I'll do something else. This isn't for, I knew when I walked, it's okay. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but making this video is bringing up that memory. I knew when I drove out of my life in that RV, it did not have to be forever. I would do it until it didn't work for me anymore. And if it didn't work in the first year, I was going to go back. And I had a car, and I would have figured it out. So that sunk cost trap, though, can keep us trapped in a life that we no longer want, that no longer fits us, that no longer fulfills us. So just think about it this way. This is how I think about my marriage. Those 13 years that I spent in my marriage, those 20 years that you spent doing whatever you were doing, belonged to that life. It belonged to that version of you. And the years ahead, whatever years you have left in your life, don't owe that past version or those past years anything. You don't owe that. You don't owe your past anything. You owe it to yourself to live your best life moving forward. And this gets more important, I think, as we get older. You start realizing you only have so many years left. And I think we all have to come to terms with, how do we want to live those remaining years? How do I want the rest of my life to look? Do I want it to look like the last decade, 2 decades? Or do I want it to look like something new, something different? And also giving yourself permission to know that what I'm setting out to do now, or what I think I want to do now, might change again. And that's okay. And I think as we get older, and as we get out and do more and break out of those cycles of shoulds and coulds and the sunk cost trap, we become less interested in convincing ourselves to want something just because we wanted it 10 years ago. Just because I wanted something 5 years ago doesn't mean I have to want it today. I'm a different person. You know what I'm realizing? We often say, oh, I reinvented myself. But how many times do we reinvent ourselves? Is it just a one-time thing? Because I'm thinking no. I'm thinking that reinventing ourselves is a lifelong process. Because maybe reinventing yourself isn't about finding out who you really are, but it's about giving yourself permission to become whoever you are now, in this moment. So I started this video by saying that I don't want to travel the way I have been. And I don't know what the next stage or the next phase of this looks like for me right now. But you know what? That's okay. I don't have to know. We tend to think that we have to have the replacement life all figured out before we move on to the next phase. But maybe we don't. Maybe just recognizing, you know what? This doesn't fit me anymore is enough. Well, the reason I wanted to make this video is because I just wanted anyone else who is kind of feeling like maybe something is about to change in their lives, or you've been thinking about making a change and maybe where you're at just isn't working for you anymore. I just want you to know that you're allowed to change your mind about the life you once chose. No matter how much you once wanted it, no matter how much you once loved it, no matter how much you once invested in that life. And you can still be grateful for it, but that doesn't mean you have to stay there. And maybe reinvention isn't something we do just once. Maybe it's something we do as many times as we need to. What do you think? Let me know what your thoughts on this below. Let me know if you reinvented yourself. If you want to reinvent yourself, let me know below. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, subscribe to my channel and click the thumbs up on this video. Leave a kind comment below, hype it, share it with everybody you know. And just because you think you're subscribed, do me a favor, double check, because YouTube does unsubscribe people. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you being here with me on this journey of figuring it all out as I go. And I will see you on Sunday. In the meantime, be happy, be free, and be kind. See you soon.